So how are you doing? Oh, wow, you've got the window behind you. That's fantastic. But I can
Yeah, well, the backlighting might be a issue.
Yeah, it is a little bit, but I get a glimpse of the lower part of one of the small windows there.
I could just do a white background.
Okay, maybe you give us a view of the window a bit later.
Sure.
So yeah, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me. This is not very formal, not very structured, really. I've got a few questions I want to ask you.
Good.
And yeah, I wanted to start by just asking you, apart from pleasantries, whether you could actually tell me a bit about yourself. What is it that makes the breath so important to you? Why is this your thing? And perhaps expand a bit on your background and how you've come to be a leading pioneer in the world for conscious breathing.
Okay, well, I was, I had so many moments in my life where breathing just became front and center, and there was absolutely nothing else. I had no choice but to focus on the breathing. And it got me through some really difficult moments. I can remember a time when I was in the military and I was pretty much at the end of my rope. I was in deep sea diver training at the time and special operations training, and very grueling physical kind of practice there. And I was falling behind. We were running that day and I was falling behind, and just thinking, oh my God, I just can't make it. I can't keep going. I was run totally out of juice. And one of my buddies pulled back and got along the side of me, Ed Kane actually, and he said, let's breathe together. And we started breathing in rhythm to our footsteps, and just his presence was a huge, I could feel that energetic support, from someone. But as soon as I started focusing on the breathing, it took my mind off the pain and took my mind away from, let's call it, performance degrading self-talk. Quickly, very suddenly, I was in the zone and I was catching up, and pretty soon I was right on the heels of the leader, and I stayed with them for the rest of that day. So it just gave me a way to get through really difficult times. And I had a couple of near drowning experiences growing up. And when I regained my breathing, it was the most ecstatic thing. And on one of those peak experience, I would say, I was resuscitated. And when I started breathing again, it was like the air wasn't air. The air was filled with these bubbles of light. And I'm breathing in these bubbles of light, millions of them, and they're bursting everywhere inside of me. And the experience was so ecstatic. And I sort of got a taste of this deeper level of breath, of the mystical aspect of breath, of the chi, the prana, the life force aspect of that breath, a felt experience of that. And so I was sold. There was just something magical and ecstatic about breathing. And so, little things or big things just kept piling up in my life, turning me back to the breath. And there was no avoiding it. I tried to have an advertising agency. I tried doing other work, and someone would have a spontaneous hyperventilation experience in the middle of our breathing, in the middle of our advertising meeting. And so I just started getting the message that, there's really nothing else I'm interested in. And it seems like the universe is telling me there's nothing else I'm supposed to be doing. And so I just gave up everything else and became a missionary for the breath. And I would say that was officially back in probably 1976, maybe. And I just refused to do anything else since then.
That's awesome. Beautiful, actually. So this may be a strange question, but what's your biggest passion with regard to the breath? So within the framework of the breath, what's your biggest passion?
Well, we're trying to get to something, we're trying to teach something that cannot be taught, right? So like balance. It doesn't matter how good I am at balancing, I can't pass that skill on to anyone. We can learn it, but it cannot be taught. And so that's about my passion, is how do you teach something that cannot be taught? How do you turn people on to something that I don't have? It's not that I'm giving them, but how do you turn them on to an ability, a resource, an aspect of themselves that they haven't discovered or uncovered? And so I just love being around people when they kind of get it. You know, we practice a couple of breathing things, try this, try that, and then something starts to come over them. They have this amazing experience. And so I'm just, you know, I love being there for that, in that moment when it's like this huge aha, or I've been talking about it recently. You know, those magic eye photos where you
Yes.
look at them and they're just random geometric shapes. But if you force yourself to look in a way that you don't usually look in front of the picture, look behind the picture, you know, do something with your vision, this 3D image appears. Well, for me, breathing is like developing a different way of feeling. If we look at that picture the way we look at every other picture, we're not going to unlock that 3D image. And breathing gives us a new way of feeling, a different way of feeling. And when you change the way that you feel, something emerges. We discover things about ourselves. We connect with the spirit in us. We connect with a higher power, a deeper ability. I don't know how to talk about it. We could put all kind of labels on it if you wanted to, but something, some potential in us is unlocked when we use the breath to relate to our feelings in a different way. So these days, that's what I'm about. I'm just, how do you get people to that moment where they discover something or something unlocks in them? And God, I can't think of a better day than when I'm with somebody and they get it.
I want to come back to this actually, because this is what really I valued the most and appreciated, and what inspired me the most when I first met you, about the breath and how that related to what I do, but in a very, very different way. But before we do that, I would like to just ask you one other question, which is, what's the single biggest thing you have learned that's made the most impact on you or other people, which may or may not be related to the breath, but I suspect it might be?
Well, you know, sort of like when you read a book and you really enjoy it, you put it away a year later or 6 months later, whatever, you read it again and you see all kind of things in the book that you didn't see the first time. You know, like, where was that? Like, holy cow, I missed that the first time I read it. So something in us has grown, something in us has moved forward. And when we re-look at that book, we see things we didn't see. So so it's being in that game of, I guess, awakening or even ascension, expansion of consciousness, self-realization, liberation, moments of enlightenment. You know, we can use the breath to get rid of headaches. We can use the breath to slow your heart rate down, hack into your immune system, get rid of pain, manage emotions, and so on. But the highest order of benefits from breath work, I mean, that's what I'm after. And what's the next highest thing? What's the next, you know, what's the next limit that we thought was a limit and it isn't? You know, and that being in that game, feeling that like you're really part of the evolution of consciousness, the awakening of consciousness. I think that's the game. That's everything else follows from that. When I'm connected to my spirit, my mind is expanded, my consciousness is elevated. and I look out upon a world I've never seen before. I mean, it's been there, but the way I've been looking at it, I've been missing so much beauty, so much power. You know, that's where we need to be focused. You know, what's the highest potential? And that's something you could do in any moment. Like, what's the highest potential of this moment? This is never going to come back. It's never going to happen again. This particular place with this particular person, you know, and what's the highest potential of each moment in life? And can we use the breath to move towards that? You know, what's the maximum potential that I have, that we have, that's possible in this moment?
Amazing. And I'm guessing, is that possible with the breath? The answer is yes. But, you know,
well, it's kind of like, you know, if somebody is ready, the next book they read, it's going to have the answer. The next teacher they meet is going to awaken them. The next technique they practice, it's going to liberate them. But it has very little to do with the teacher or the book or the technique, and it has to do with readiness. And so, I mean, that's the game too, is how do you create readiness? I had this ongoing conversation with Tony Robbins. He calls it hunger. You know, he says if people are hungry enough, they're going to do what they need to do. They're going to realize what they need to realize. They're going to wake up. And so I call it readiness. He calls it hunger. How do you create readiness in people? And I think that breath is a big part of that. You get a taste of something and you wonder, well, what else is possible? And if I practice a little more, or if I practice this, or I practice that, what can begin to happen? So yeah, that's, life is an adventure. And even in these crazy times, we have some really, this is an opportunity. Every moment is an amazing opportunity to take our experience of life to the next higher level, to express something higher about ourselves. And each moment there's a possibility for that. And the breath is a perfect tool. If that's your mission, if that's your goal, then the breath will help you to achieve it for sure.
I love what you said about it's about the readiness of the person who wants to take it to that next level.
Yeah, because people want everything to change. They like their situations to change. They like their circumstances to change, but they don't seem willing to change themselves. And that's what's required. And somebody who wants to change themselves, the breath is the perfect tool for that. And in fact, that's a common theme or a common thing I see in breathwork. The theme is change. If you're about to go through a change, if you're in the middle of a change, if you're recovering from a change, breathing is the way to navigate and manage those big life changes.
So what do you say to people, even scientists or medical practitioners, who dismiss what we call conscious breathing as mystic hooey or woo-woo baloney? What do you say about that?
Well, there's fewer and fewer of them because science is stepping up. Science is catching up. There are so many unarguable studies related to breathing and how you can into your nervous system. You can change your psychological state, your emotional state, your chemical state, your biological state. You can change those things with conscious breathing. Very few people are arguing with that anymore. Too many studies are piling up. So I'm seeing fewer and fewer skeptics. 40 years ago, it seemed like everybody was a skeptic. I felt like what was that expression, crying from the rooftops, a voice crying out in the desert. And people, breathing, schmeating, that's pop psychology, woo-woo, new agey.
I've been breathing all my life. Why do I need to learn how to breathe?
I worked with a police chief, a detective in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and he was preparing to retire. And he was having the same problem. He started with meditation, and then he was doing Reiki, and then he had amazing awakening one day when he was doing distant Reiki, and the woman called him up while he was doing distant Reiki. Now, he's a detective. He's a chief of the state police. And this is like, holy cow, he's very down to earth and real and practical, but what could he do with this experience? And so it motivated him to just make a shift in his life and begin to look into woo-woo things because they're not woo-woo. And
No.
so he had the same question. He says, I got detectives in my station. They're going, meditation, blah, blah, blah. And so he said, maybe you can come and talk to them, So what I found out worked was he's these big macho detective guys like, nah, this is real. This is logical. This is, no, you got to measure it, blah, blah. And I said, look, Navy SEALs and special forces are using this. Who the hell do you think you are? What are you, some kind of special guy, So sometimes you have to slap people, shake people, or embarrass them into just looking at the research or just practicing something, and then you don't need any proof. You have a real felt experience, and it's unarguable. So the skeptics are, they're dwindling in number.
Dwindling, well, that's good, isn't it? Because I remember you telling me a story, more than one story actually, of how you had created in your own physiology some dramatic healing effects of injuries that you'd had, physical injuries that you literally just engaged your breath in a very particular way. And I mean, I don't know if you want to share that, but I did attempt to share this with a friend of mine because I was so impressed by it and amazed by it, because it does sound almost impossible, doesn't it? And they didn't believe me at all, but I know that you had lots of witnesses to the physical healing that you created.
Well, and I taught firewalking, and you're so familiar with firewalking, and so, when you walk on fire and don't get burned, you have no choice but to begin to question, well, what else is possible? What else did I think I could do that we can do? And so, I've had miracles like that connected to the breath, like just spontaneous healing, and not just me, but other people, clients and people on their own practicing. And so, my friend Stig Severinsen, for example, can hold his breath underwater for 20 minutes. That's not supposed to be possible. A human is supposed to get permanent brain damage after 4 to 6 minutes without air. And so, what humans are capable of, maybe, well, no doubt, we can do a lot more than we have been led to believe, and a lot more than some people are willing to imagine. But if you have an experience you cannot make go away, like, I don't have the luxury of doubt. I've just seen miracles. We're out of the book miracles. I can't make that go away, no matter how logical or rational arguments I hear. So what do you do about it? You try to understand, or you try to figure out, well, what is this? What is, maybe consciousness trumps biology. The human spirit is more powerful than the laws of physics. Who knows? But maybe that's our job, to see what are we capable of. And if a thought doesn't serve us, why are we holding on to it? We should, every now and then go through our belief systems and throw away the ones that are no longer pertinent or don't apply, so that we feel like we're continuing in this growth of expansion of consciousness and in human ability, evolution. Maybe that's the thing. Sure, some things weren't possible 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago for humans, but now everybody's doing it or experiencing it. So, humans we're a work in progress. We're not done yet.
Yes.
And so who knows what we'll be capable of when we really get our shit together, as they say.
And I love that as well, around everything you've just been saying. It is an inquiry. If you're open, if you're ready, it's just about an inquiry, isn't it? It's not about having evidence. I was a lawyer for over 20 years. Back then, evidence really mattered, and of course, it still matters in some way, in some levels. But now, I'm working in the area of consciousness with work I do as a coach, and I know that you are fully immersed, and you've mentioned it a few times already in this conversation. I'd like to really talk about that with you in more depth. I recently met with I want to tell you something that
Go ahead.
I'm involved with a group of coaches. There's 8 of us who meet together really regularly. We're actually currently creating a global consciousness summit, which was going to be in a couple of months' time. We're probably going to postpone it. We actually sat down together to attempt to define consciousness. Now, each of us put forward a very true but different answer from the rest of us. And, you know, everything that we said reflected different aspects of consciousness. And neither one aspect nor the other was more or less important than the other. I think we came to the conclusion that we were basically attempting to define what is indefinable. So I'd actually love you to say and share, what does consciousness mean to
you
you?
can experience. I think that the course. Yeah, well, the Course in Miracles, which, you know, fell in my lap 30, 40 years ago, just changed everything, my view of life. Some people might be familiar with it, but might be a little too Christian for some people. But anyway, the Course in Miracles, just a brilliant gift to the world. There's a quote in there that says, a universal theology is impossible, but a universal experience is not only possible, it's necessary. And I think consciousness is that universal experience. And, you know, I might be able, I can't prove a lot of things, but one thing that's unarguable is that I am conscious, that I am experiencing, that I am aware. And maybe there are levels of that and degrees of that awareness, of that consciousness. But that's the name of the game, right? The Buddha called it the witness. That the essence of the Buddha is this ability not to think, not to analyze, not to judge, but to observe thinking and analyzing and judging, and observe sensations and observe situations and observe your breath. So this witnessing, this capacity we have to be present, to be conscious, to be alive. Maybe we're talking about one thing, the same thing. You know, I think the materialistic paradigm is already, it's outdated. Things haven't shifted, but it's becoming more and more unarguable that consciousness is primary. Consciousness didn't evolve out of matter. Matter evolved out of consciousness. And so we are trying to talk about something that's difficult or even impossible to put into words, but the experience of it, moment to moment, direct experience of it is unarguable. We can question a lot of other things, but here I am, and it's hard to question that I am not, I am, and I am conscious that I am. And what do you do with that, right?
What do you do with that?
That's the game.
It kind of...
Well, we elevate it. Yeah,
Yes.
My first teacher, Ken Kai's, in the Handbook to Higher Consciousness. Oh, actually, this is one of his books right here, The Power of Unconditional Love. I found this one, I read this book years ago, and I recently went back to it just to refresh myself. He talks about these different levels of consciousness, and suffering occurs only at low levels of consciousness. And as we raise our consciousness, suffering and lots of illnesses and diseases and pain and problems just disappear, because we're filtering our experience through a higher lens, and certain things show up that don't show up, and certain other things don't, you know, aren't visible anymore. They seem so. I mean, yeah, the game is consciousness, and I think when we are breathing consciously, we're getting a handle on our consciousness. We are directing our attention. We are focusing our awareness. And so breathing gives us a chance to really explore and develop our consciousness. And maybe there's no difference between being conscious and being spiritual. Maybe there's no difference in consciousness and energy. Maybe consciousness is energy. Energy is consciousness. And so, I mean, yeah, it's hard to find the language, and maybe someday we'll be able to like define all this very clearly. But in the meantime, it's up to us to just be our own scientists and explore our own nature. And it seems to me that the essence of our nature is consciousness and energy. So when we are breathing consciously, we get a handle on our consciousness, our awareness, and we get a handle on our energy. That puts us in the best position to evolve, develop, perform, produce, be creative. So, on a very practical level, just being able to stay clear and calm and loving when the shit hits the fan and when you're hijacked by fear, anxiety, that ability to use the breath to come into a clear space of awareness, that can save our life. And it can certainly solve a lot of problems in the world if we can begin to wake up more, become more conscious, more aware. That can only help us and the world.
Absolutely. I think that neatly answers my question, why does consciousness matter? But it's really, especially for someone like me who has spent a lot of my life in my head, and I'm now recovering from that in a way, to kind of get my head around what you said, that consciousness preceded everything else and matter developed from consciousness, which means that we as human beings developed out of consciousness rather than the other way around. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
How, like,
yeah, well, that's one of I saw in the science, one of the top unanswered questions in philosophy and science is, how did consciousness arise from matter? And I don't think that question is ever going to be answered because it's the wrong question. It didn't happen that way. And I think we're getting more and more proof of that. Quantum physics, there's more space, there's more nothingness than there is stuff. And so consciousness is part of this seemingly nothingness, but it's the stuff of existence. So we're learning. I think this generation, I think there's going to be some really huge breakthroughs, some real huge shifts in paradigms. The paradigm has already shifted, but a lot of medicine and science haven't caught up. Medicine still is like on this billiard ball kind of mentality about life. And okay, what chemical do we have to formulate to solve this other chemical problem? And we know that's not getting us anywhere. We need a big awakening to another level. And I think breath is part of that awakening, definitely.
Yes, even is it the CDC or somebody in one very highly respected American organization says that something like 85% of diseases have a psychological root.
Yeah.
And so popping
there's no
pills
arguing
and
about
so
that.
on.
Yep. And we're trying to solve the problem with the same mind that created the problem. So like Einstein said, that's not possible. And I think one of the things that's really powerful about breath work is that it awakens body intelligence. It awakens heart intelligence. So you don't have to just rely on your head, your thinking. You don't have to think your way through life. You can open up heart intelligence. You can open up body intelligence. And you have more to draw from to make decisions, and you can show up more fully. So I think that's one of the beauties of breath work, is that it awakens body intelligence and heart intelligence. And so we make better decisions, and there's less confusion. And when we get it, we have a gut feeling, or we want to listen to our heart. The language is already there, but breathing is a practical way to make it real. So should I do this? Should I do that? Is it good? Is it bad? Should I leave? Should I quit my job? Should I keep it? You can't solve problems that way.
Yeah.
You got to get out of your head, which you take a breath, drop down into your heart, take another breath, drop all the way down into your belly, and touch those intelligence centers. We have neurons in our heart. We have neurons in our intestines. let's make use of them. Breathing is a way to make use of that higher intelligence, deeper intelligence, whatever you want to call it, body intelligence. And so, yeah, let's use the breath to begin to make better decisions and view the world from a fuller place than just a little peephole in our head, you know?
Yeah, so your approach is obviously very physiological as opposed to mental, which, you know, I mean, I think if you combine both approaches, it can be really complementary and supportive of each other. So, but I, having now experienced breathwork through you and practicing it myself in my own life, I absolutely see it as a hugely powerful tool for self-awareness, consciousness, a new way of being, a new way of thinking, actually, without even thinking. So can you say a bit more about this body intelligence and heart intelligence and other body part intelligences? Tell me a bit more about that and how that relates to the breath.
Yeah, you know, like maybe we have an experiencing self and we have a storytelling self. So if you're eating ice cream and I can ask you, hey, how do you like that ice cream that you're eating, right? And you go, wow, it's cold and wow, it's delicious. If you're done with the ice cream cone and I ask you, hey, how did you like that ice cream cone you had yesterday? Now you can only tell me a story about it. And I think a lot of people are caught up in that story self, the storytelling self, and they're disconnected from their experiencing self. And so breathing helps us to get into a present moment experience. And in a very practical way, you know, I'm right, you're wrong, and I got to put all my energy into convincing you that you got to see things the way I see it because you're stupid and everybody else knows it and you don't, and I have to like convince you. And everybody's trying to push their story on everybody else, and I got my story and I'm sticking to it. And I'm gonna fight yours off. And so we have to shift out of that storytelling self and drop into a present moment experiencing self. And in a very simple way, so I'm in the middle of an argument, and like, where is that going until somebody just gives up? But what if somebody wakes up instead of giving up? So I wake up in the middle of this argument and I think to myself, come on, a year from now, how important will this have looked? You know, like, how important really is this? So if I just stop, take a breath, forget about what I'm trying to prove and what I'm trying to defend, and open and expand, relax and let go. And I'm actually on a different footing right now. I can respond instead of react. I pulled myself out of that and I have a higher view, a better view. And everything, life changes from that moment on because I took a conscious breath in the middle of an argument. Everything changes. So that's the power of getting a handle on our breath and getting out of our heads, like you began by, you know, saying that. Yeah, right, wrong, good, bad. That mode of thinking is really vital and it's necessary in a court of law, in different situations, but it's not the kind of mind that we want to be guiding ourselves through life with. There are other modes of thinking. Michael Hewitt Gleason and Edward de Bono talk about these 6 or 7 thinking caps, that there are different kinds of thinking, different ways, modes of thinking, and we all seem to be locked into one kind of thinking, and it's keeping us. It's like a binary computer, you know, good, bad, right, wrong, us, them, I should, I shouldn't. It's like it just keeps us bogged down. And we have to break out of that kind of thinking into creative thinking, into, you know, other modes of thinking. And maybe the breath, we can develop the breath so it's like a switch. And if I start to move into an emotional state or a psychological state that is unresourceful or dysfunctional, I can come in with the breath and it's like flipping a switch and I can get myself back on track or back into center or open my heart again. expand my awareness. Or sometimes it's a matter of focusing and really being laser-like in our focus and not being distracted. And so the breath is a way for us to do that. The breath is a way for us to expand our consciousness or to focus it like a laser. And so upward and onward.
So we don't necessarily need to climb to the top of a mountain and meditate for 20 years in order to achieve that. Do you think it's possible just even with a single breath to do that?
Oh, it's a skill. And the more you develop it, the more you practice, the better you get at it. If you're in a really uncomfortable physical, emotional, psychological state, it might take you an hour of breathing, or it might take you, depending on how deep it is and how big it is, it might take you longer, a few days of practicing. But you get better and better. And pretty soon it's like a muscle. You've exercised it so well, you can lift heavy objects very quickly. And so you can, yes, you can refine your skills so that it is just like a switch. And in a moment, you can shift from any state to any other state. But we all have, some of us learn quickly, some of us learn slowly, but it's possible for all of us to develop some real amazing ability at shifting our energy, shifting our focus, shifting our chemistry, shifting our emotions. And yes, with one or two breaths, that's my goal. And I've got it down now fairly well for many things, that one or two breaths is enough for me to just drop what it was that I was stuck with, move on, shift my emotional state, shift my psychological state, my chemical state. Yeah, one breath, ultimately, that's mastery at some point.
It's incredible, isn't it, actually? But to get to that point, you have to have worked that muscle first, put the work in, practice, develop it as a practice, I assume. Because yes, we have been breathing all our lives, but not in a conscious way. And so, yeah, because what we want to do really is rise above and out of our perception that's causing us to get stuck at these lower levels, isn't it? It's all about that dysfunctional awareness.
Yeah, I mean, if it's our intention to let something go, to move to the next higher level, that intention is really important. And maybe some people don't. They want to stick with their story. They just, for whatever reason, they're not ready. I don't know. But people who are really committed to growth, breathing is a perfect tool for growth, emotional growth, psychological growth, spiritual growth, growth in performance. And so, yeah, it's a skill. And, we all start somewhere. If you're a frail, elderly person in bed, or you're a peak athlete, where we start, what we focus on can be different, the direction we go, the intensity of our practice. I wish there was a way around daily practice. But there isn't. I think, the habits that we develop, are what moves us in each moment. If I get upset 50 times a day because of the weather, because of something you said, because of the economy, because of the coronavirus, I mean, people have gotten upset so many times that they're so good at it, anything can upset them. And they actually have trained in becoming upset. You just look at me the wrong way and I get upset. And so that's training. But if I practice opening my heart, if I practice relaxing, and I do that all the time, then anything can open my heart, and anything can cause me to relax. Anything can become a trigger to remind me of what's important, remind me and to remember of who I am and how I want to be. And we can forget that. We can get caught up very easily. So we need a way to come back home, to keep returning to source, returning to center. And the breath is a perfect tool for that.
And presumably, well, I know there are different ways of using the breath to achieve similar results. But I loved what you said then about intention being actually probably at the core of that. Yeah. And then using the breath purposefully.
Yeah, because two people can practice the same exact breathing technique and get different physiological, emotional, and psychological and spiritual benefits. And they can practice opposite breathing techniques and get the same benefit. So that's the creative, that's the wild card, right? That's the in this game, the human consciousness and our heartfelt intention and the pure, desire, aspiration, the power that has. And when we can channel that energy and give order to it and develop, strategies and skills and to really wield that creative power that we all have, we can make a big changes in a very short time in our lives and in the world,
So it's
hopefully.
about the willingness to be open and to make a change, I suppose, isn't it? And
Yeah.
open your heart.
Yeah.
So can
Yeah,
you
that
talk?
willingness is everything. Some people, I don't know how. Well, are you willing? I can't. Well, are you willing? That willingness is a very powerful element. And, if we're willing, we'll find a way. Sooner or later, we'll find a way. If you're willing to change, you'll find a way. But so that willingness is powerful. Are you willing to let go of your story? Are you willing to, forget, forgive? The willingness is really, really powerful.
Yes, I think it's everything actually to start with.
Yeah.
Thank you. And can I ask you a question about intuition? Intuition is something I discovered a few years ago, and find it to be probably, along with the breath, the most powerful resource available to me and everybody, actually, if only they were to choose to be open to it. How can the breath allow or enable you to access it, and how does it enhance intuition?
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you take a few breaths down into your belly and you awaken body intelligence, you take a few breaths in your heart, you awaken heart in your chest, and you awaken heart intelligence. And now when you are awakening your intuition, when body intelligence, mind intelligence, heart intelligence come together, work together, that is intuition, I think. And in a very practical way, and recently I've been playing with it because you can use your relationship to your breath to gauge your intuition. So, for example, a sigh of relief. There's an interesting research around a sigh, and that is that the average person takes a sigh every 5 minutes or about 12 times an hour. And a sigh is an inhale that's twice as big as your tidal volume. And everybody has felt that. You've felt that from time to time. A big breath just comes out of nowhere. You didn't think about it. You didn't do it. It happened all by itself. And this happens about 12 times an hour. This is nature making sure that we hyperinflate our lungs regularly. Otherwise, we will lose our respiratory capacity. So everyone has had that time, has felt that, where they weren't thinking about it, but a big breath comes to them all by itself. You're not probably catching it every time, but people do catch it from time to time. So what I discovered was that if I take a breath, choose to breathe, and the way that I choose to breathe is exactly the way my body would have me breathe in that moment, I just made an intuitive connection. And it's felt. It's like when you're loading a truck with boxes. I use this analogy, right? Pick up a box and put it, pick up a box and put it. And you know how heavy it is and how much effort it takes. But then somebody comes along and grabs the other side of that box. When you lift that box, it's like, whoa, that was easier because of the support you got. So when you take a breath and the nature is supporting you because you are taking a breath that nature wants you to take, you have a felt experience of intuition. and otherwise you feel like you're fighting the breath. You're trying to breathe, but it isn't the way your body wants to breathe. You're forcing yourself to breathe, but it's not the way you need to breathe in that moment. And you're literally out of line, out of alignment with your nature, with your intuition. And so the quality of the breath, when you can take a breath that's very big and expansive and powerful and very effortless and easy and light, that's an intuitive moment. You are breathing exactly in the way that is in perfect harmony with your nature. So we can begin to use the breath to gauge just how connected am I to my body? How connected am I to my intuition? And again, that's an internal experience that's felt, but as you practice and develop, you can. And you know, you're coaching people in breathing sessions very often for the first 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. The person is just fighting to connect with their breath. They're pushing, they're pulling, they're out of sync, they're trying to do it right, and it's not really working. But at some point, something clicks, and suddenly it gets really easy. The breath is very powerful. You're vibrating, you're tingling, you're so alive, you're so aware. You've made that connection to life, spirit, energy, intuition, your heart, whatever you want to call it, higher self. And so the breath is a way for us to develop our intuition and to gauge how strong our intuition is. Should I do this or should I do that? Well, okay, let me consider this. Take a few breaths. Okay, now let me consider this. And if you practice, you begin to be able to sense that your breath can give you information. And it's intuitive information. So practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? That old joke. Practice, you know.
Yes, I remember you teaching me one of the very first things I learned from you was that the inhale is about opening and expanding. And that's actually just what you just did then when you were demonstrating the connection to your intuition. And that inhale, opening and expanding to possibilities, and just asking, you know, and letting the answer emerge for itself.
Well, we live in an intelligent space. I mean, you know, and how do you tap that intelligent space? It's within us, it's around us. If we can free ourselves from our skin encapsulated ego, we literally can connect to higher intelligence, call it intuition, divine mind. It's available to each of us, and sometimes people stumble over it accidentally. Sometimes in a crisis, it awakens, and through practice, we can develop it. So.
Speaking about crisis, actually, obviously right now, the world is in this incredible state that it hasn't been in for a very long time with this coronavirus pandemic. And a lot of people feel that it's a crisis. They feel personally in crisis. They're struggling with anxiety. And many who have the virus are struggling to breathe. Can you speak to that at all? What kind of words of wisdom do you have around that?
Well, I mean, it's a forced pause. It's forcing people to pause. So maybe there's a message from life there. And I heard that the water around Venice is clean for the first time in 500 years or something. So maybe this is an environmentalist conspiracy that just planes aren't flying, factories are shut off, you know. So, you know, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to look at what's really important. It's an opportunity to stay home with the kids. It's an opportunity to catch up on your reading. It's an opportunity to develop some abilities that you always say you don't have time to do this, you don't have time to do that. Now you got lots of time. What's your excuse now? So I see this as an opportunity, and I'm probably more blessed or more fortunate than some people. Where I am here in Mexico, we built this place for just such events, off the grid, our own water, our own gardens, our own orchard. We're self-sustaining. And so we don't see much difference in our day-to-day life here because we already unplugged, you know. My heart goes out to people who are really suffering. And it's interesting that this virus goes right to the lungs, you know, it just goes right to the lungs. So how do you strengthen your immune system so that it doesn't do you in? that's another reason to breathe and make your breath fuller and freer and to strengthen your immune system. And if your intuition is good, you're going to take a left instead of a right, and you'll avoid something and you'll never even know what it was you avoided, right? So this is, if ever, the three principles I teach in breathwork are consciousness, relaxation, and energy. If ever there was a time for us to become more conscious, this is it. More conscious of your social distancing, more conscious of your fear-based thinking, more aware of your sanitary habits. The world is asking us, life is demanding that we become more conscious. And it's demanding that let's not go crazy here. Let's remember to relax. Just because you're in a crisis is not a reason to run around like a chicken with its head cut off. This is a time to focus and get centered and find the eye of the storm. And this is a time when you need to generate positive energy. So I don't see it as a crisis. I see it as an opportunity. Maybe we're being forced to grow or die. And some people their system was already in such a fragile place that this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. And so, we have to look at crises as opportunities. And what choice do we have? We're being forced to learn new habits. We're being forced to look at things with fresh eyes and reconsider and reorganize our life. Maybe a lot of people who've been working at home for the last 2 months, when this lift is over, they're going to go, you know what? Look, everything's working. So let's all keep working from at home. Who knows? We'll have a new normal when we come out of this. So keeping a positive mental state, staying conscious, calming yourself, using it to stay clear and relaxed, and mustering up the energy you need to make the changes that you need to make and to deal with the stresses and the messes. So we're being called to grow up.
Yeah, and I love what you said there about relaxation, how important that is. And is it ever too late to begin to prepare our system? I'm not talking about like governmental systems or world systems, but our own system. And what's the best way? How would you recommend people do that?
The average person, my friend Peter Litchfield, who's my go-to guy for all things respiratory chemistry, respiratory physiology. He had this beautiful slide. He shared it. I forget the rights to the slide, but it was an MRI slide, and it showed what the average person can do to the oxygen level in their brain in less than 60 seconds. And the answer is you can decrease the amount of oxygen you are sending to your brain by 40 or 50% in less than a minute. And anybody can do this through breathing. So if you can rob your cells of oxygen through certain kinds of breathing, you can super oxygenate your cells through certain kinds of breathing. You can ramp up your immune system. You can strengthen your cardiovascular and your pulmonary system so that it fights things off better and it recovers more quickly, and it can even prevent things, right? So when we play with our breath, we're playing with our pH, we're playing with our chemistry. And so we got a handle on our life. So this is a good chance for us to see just what's possible. How far can we go with that?
Absolutely. So if there's one breathing practice that you'd recommend people do, what is it?
Well, there are three. I mean, to me, the most important breathing practice would be a practice that makes you more conscious, that makes you more aware, that makes you more mindful, that allows you to develop meditative awareness. Any breathing exercise will work for that if you apply it in such a way. Make breathing a meditation. Use the breath to become more conscious, more awake. So whatever exercise or breathing technique that is for you, that would be it, right? What way of breathing is going to make you more conscious, more aware, pay attention, develop your concentration, your witness? That would be the best technique. Equally would be one that allows you to vent stress, relieve yourself of tension, unclog your filter so that you can think clearly and move gracefully, so your body operates at a better level. Relaxation. How can you, how can you breathe so that you can relax more deeply, more quickly, more totally, and relax on more levels at the same time? That would be the best technique to practice. And the third would be, how can you breathe to give yourself energy when you're exhausted, when you're depressed, when you're unmotivated, when you're uncreative? How can you breathe to awaken your creative juices to energize yourself? That would be the best technique. So if we could find a breathing exercise that does all three, makes you more conscious, makes you more relaxed, and gives you energy, that would be it. And so what is that? I don't know, a sigh of relief that you do intentionally, passionately, enthusiastically. So I pull in energy, I let go, and I have a moment of clarity, of present moment awareness. A sigh of relief could bring all three of those things: more awareness, more relaxation, and more energy. A yawn, combining a yawn with a sigh. So you just take a natural response like a sigh of relief or a yawn, and you begin to play with it consciously and deliberately. And now you got your foot in the door, and now maybe your intuition will guide you to what is the best exercise for you to practice right now. Maybe tomorrow you'll build on that. Maybe tomorrow it'll be another one. But if you practice the sighs of relief, exaggerate the expansion, exaggerate the relaxation, focus on all the details, the muscles, the sensations, the feelings, you're in the game. You're already producing results. And that should lead you to what the next best technique for you at this time in your life is. Sighs of relief done with passion, with enthusiasm, theatrically. Focus on some beautiful thought. Focus on a powerful word or a phrase while you're breathing in. And then have the deliberate intention to let go of old beliefs, limiting thoughts, negative emotions. So you turn a sigh of relief into a very powerful breathing technique. But the power, again, isn't in the technique, it's your intention. It's the juice that you're putting into the technique that makes the technique powerful. The technique by itself is kind of like, oh, okay, it's a yawn. But like, okay, it's a sigh, but wow, what can you make that into? That's the creative aspect of breath work. So I would get people start with a yawn, a sigh of relief, and then see where it takes you. What feelings does it activate? What emotions? How does it change your state? And then there are parameters of breathing, basic parameters like speed. Practice breathing fast, practice breathing slow. High in the chest, low in the belly. Breathe through your nose, breathe through your mouth. Use different breathing sounds. If you just start playing with the breath, that's nature's way of learning. Play is nature's way of learning. So you play with your breath and you'll learn something. If you're not interested in learning anything, then yeah, you can huff and puff all day and you won't learn a damn thing. But if you put your heart and your mind and your body into something, you're going to produce a result, guaranteed. Mm-hmm. And so start anywhere.
Great advice. Thank you. I'm going to let you go in a minute, but you just mentioned there about creativity. And I'd just love you, if you could, for a moment, just to address creativity and the breath, how the one supports the other, and so on. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, well, I think it was Eckhart Tolle who said, if you watch a child play, they don't get joy out of what they do, they put joy into what they do. And breath work is the same thing. Think creativity. How much creative energy can you put into each breath? That's going to determine how much you get out of it, how much you get back from it. So when you're breathing in, imagine your favorite fragrance, or imagine the most beautiful thought or the most beautiful image, or your highest aspiration, or imagine God, or whatever inspires you. Very consciously and deliberately focus on that while you're breathing. You are now putting creative energy into the breath, and what you get out of it is going to be more than what you put into it. So focus on what you love. What are the qualities of the heart? Joy, peace, appreciation, compassion. We have to muster up these energies and then breathe so that we put life into them, right? And we put consciousness into breath, and we breath into consciousness. My highest thought, love, peace, and joy. So if I focus on love and peace and joy, or focus on freedom while I'm breathing, I am in the creative process, and something is definitely going to get created. Something definitely is going to result.
Fantastic. And perhaps we just finish off by you sharing a little bit about your creation, this place you're building, and is it Baja? Maybe you want to show us the window and this tell us your vision and what you're creating there.
Well, about 15 years ago, this is our sanctuary. I love the spiral roof here in our sanctuary.
That's beautiful.
And we are in the desert, and this is what we call the spiral temple under construction. This is our pizza oven getting constructed.
Oh, awesome.
And we are in a really beautiful place here down at the tip of the Baja Peninsula in Mexico. We have what we call the locals call it the Three Sisters. These are our mountains, the Sierra Laguna Mountains back there. This is Rebecca and Aya. Yeah. So yeah, we are in paradise. We have hot springs right down 15-minute walk. We have the Sierra Laguna Mountains, beautiful water coming down from the mountains, waterfalls. We have our organic gardens. We have an orchard. And so we're in our little piece of paradise here.
And what's your vision? What's the vision for the place?
Well, yeah, it's a healing center. My vision is that we have a mango orchard, avocado orchard, and every kind of citrus. We have bananas and papaya. We're into biodiversity, and it's a healing ground. My vision is that people come here to heal, to learn, to grow, to teach. And so we're a retreat center, training center. We like to make use of nature. Nature is an amazing healer. So my vision is that people are going to come here someday and you just eat a mango and you're healed. You pick a carrot from the garden and you're enlightened.
Awesome.
So there's my...
Sign me up.
Well, if you put enough love into something, that love grows, and some very powerful things can happen. And when people come together in the same loving spirit and they work together, miracles happen. So my vision for this place is a place where miracles happen. And miracles are happening. It's a miracle to be alive. It's a miracle that the sun is shining. It's a miracle you can throw a seed on the ground and you look at it in a few days and something sprouts up. So I think recognizing how fortunate we are, how blessed we are, and it's hard not to feel that here. So, yeah.
Absolutely beautiful, stunning, and such a delight and a pleasure as always to speak with you, Dan. Thank you so much for your sharing, your words of wisdom, and your generosity of sharing your time. Blown away, and thank you as always, and look forward to seeing you hopefully soon when lockdown is complete and we're able to travel again. I look forward to it.
Until then, we just enjoy every breath, you know.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for the gift you are to me, the difference you've made in my life, so for showing me what you've shown me and taught me about the breath. And it's really enhanced my life in beyond measure, actually, day to day. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Okay. Okay, bye, everybody.
Take care. Bye.